Hey everyone, welcome to the studio. I'm Andrew Silverstein. Today I'll be taking you through one of the best breakdowns of what you should be prioritizing in every edit, as made famous by Walter Murch. There's so much to cover, so let's get started. So for those of you who aren't aware, Walter Murch is an American film editor, as well as a writer and sound designer. Some of his more notable work includes Apocalypse Now, The Godfather trilogy, Jarhead, House of Cards. Go check out his IMDb if you have a moment, there's so much on there. So Walter Murch took his wealth of editing knowledge and wrote a book that is front of mind for me whenever I approach a new edit. This book's called In the Blink of an Eye and will be the reference point for most of what we're about to discuss, alongside some examples to illustrate his rules. Walter Murch believes effective editing can be broken down into 6 rules. Each rule sits in a hierarchy of importance. Murch breaks down his editing hierarchy as follows: cutting for emotion, advancing the story, cutting with rhythm, leading with eye trace, the 2-dimensional plane of screen, and the 3-dimensional space. These rules sit in this order and can be broken down further by percentage of importance. Not every cut should employ all 6 rules every time, and always take into account the context of what you're actually trying to do by cutting.
You are lying. I never hit you. You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
Cutting for emotion is all about getting your audience to react to your story. This can be difficult to put into quantifiable terms, but Murch believes you must ask yourself, does your cut have an emotional value to it? And was that the correct feeling for that place in the film? The most obvious examples for me can be found in highly dramatic cinema. Take The Prestige. When it's finally revealed that Robert has been cloning himself to pull off the teleporting man trick, editor Lee Smith is able to play out an entire scene with very little dialogue, and yet you feel tension, panic, suspense. All of this is through his emotional cutting. He's picked a series of reaction shots, quick cutting, suspenseful music, all to carry the audience through the scene. Cutting for emotion is the most direct way to manipulate your audience, and is arguably the most important of Walter's 6 rules.
Cell phone's off, right? Okay, here we go. Exterior. Cemetery. Night. The shootout.
Although this seems to go without saying, you've always got to ask yourself, does this cut evolve the story that I'm telling? This can help you trim the fat of your edits, fix stories that feel as though they're lagging, and help you take your edits to another level. When seeing the end result, it's always hard to see how much story editing's actually been done. It's almost always a whole lot. A lot of the time, what's been taken out are what I call showreel shots or scenes. Parts of the film, at the end of the day, you're probably filming just to humor the cinematographer or director. Cool shots, awesome scenes, massive high budget moments, all that do little to advance the story. As an editor, if you're not advancing the story, you aren't really doing your job.
You're a crook. You're a cheat and a swindler. That's what you are. How can you do it?
Rhythm in editing is arguably as crucial as the first 2 rules. Many great editors are ex-musicians or have some background in an area that involves rhythm and pacing. This is because the speed at which you cut can have a drastic effect on how your audience reacts to a scene. This is something that's actually increased a fair amount since non-linear editing systems have come to being, but choosing the rhythm of a scene is a powerful tool in your arsenal. A great example of this is the film Whiplash, and if you want to see exactly how this works, follow this link to an amazing breakdown of one of the more powerful scenes from the film. It's an absolute masterclass. The next editing rule is cutting with eye trace, which is actually a fascinating editing phenomenon that will make you analyze every cut you see in a film. It's a really great exercise, and I actually encourage you to do this with one of your favorite scenes, even going over all 6 rules and seeing where they've been used and how they've been used. Eye trace is a simple concept that answers this question. Where are you forcing the perspective of the viewer's eye when you cut to a new shot? A great example of this is Mad Max Fury Road. This film always tries to center its framing of characters, allowing the viewer to keep up with the film despite its fast cutting and hectic tempo. This video essay here goes into great detail, and I encourage you to watch it through. This film simply wouldn't have worked with different framing and is a perfect example of eye trace.
God himself, he spoke to me and he said, Alfie, you were meant to have these things.
You crossed the line, Alfie.
The 5th rule is cutting on a 2-dimensional plane of screen. Simply put, are you crossing the line with your shots? This derives from the 180-degree rule of shooting and insists that in order to keep your audience's orientation, you must film on one side of a 180-degree straight line. This rule does get bent all of the time in a way to purposefully disorient the audience, but typically will be adhered to when cutting.
What do you want to talk about?
Finally, we reach cutting in 3D space. Very similar to the 5th rule, this is one that's commonly broken in order to manipulate the audience's orientation. But typically your cuts should maintain a sense of where your characters are in 3D space. If you fail to do so, you may accidentally unsettle or distract the audience. A great example of this is The Shining. They do a lot of cutting around this rule to disorientate the audience. So that was Walter Murch's Rule of 6. I hope you learned something from this lesson and found the resources useful. We'll see you at the next one, but until then, watch some films and really start digesting this lesson. There's a lot to take in. Cheers.